Welcome back to Morning Express, 7:04 a.m. on this 13th day of January. Good morning. Time for The Way It Is. Benji Ndolo, Tony Gachoka, good to see you.
Good morning, Sophia. How are you?
Good morning.
Absolutely.
You had a good weekend?
Yes, and when I got in the morning, today up in the morning, the first message I got from my Twitter was Sophia Wanuna praising the Lord and saying, thank God for today. I think we should have a sermon from you one of these mornings.
No, it's the beginning of the week. You have so much to be thankful for. That's why I said that, bless the Lord, oh my soul. There's so many things. I'm alive, I'm in good health, I have a job, great people that I get to talk to every morning. My family, there's so much to give thanks for.
We are saved.
Well, Benji, but not long. Could I also ask and invite the Lord to help me this week?
And the same for me.
Yes, Benji needs a lot of help. Yeah. But good to see you both.
And may I say, you're looking absolutely lovely this morning.
Thank you. Yeah, Benji told me the dress is a KTN dress because it matches my couch and this.
And the
yeah? Don't we just look amazing with this?
And the theme of Morning Express.
And the theme. Yes, we're all about keeping with the theme, at least once in a week.
But Benji borrowed my tie. You can see
I can see you guys red, black shoes. Why don't men
Nothing
wear
gets
red
classier
shoes?
than polka dots.
Benji should have done red shoes.
No.
Polka dots. Anyway, good catch up. Great to see you. Hope you enjoyed your weekend. Benji.
I did.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You did?
Well, I didn't do too much. Just rested.
I was a bit depressed by the growing corruption in this country.
Yeah.
I'm getting very concerned because every day I wake up and pray that Uhuru's government will make a difference. And Sophia, you're the host, so I'll leave it to you. But when these headlines keep hitting you every day, questions begin to beg.
It's disturbing. We'll get to that. There's quite a lot on the plate of EACC. We'll be talking about that. But let's begin on a lighter note today. Our governor, Nairobi governor, and the woman representative. It's actually a woman. I don't know why people keep saying women representative. It is woman representative, not women representative. Rachel Shebesh. And what has been going on. So now there's indication that they will be talking. Initially, Shebesh's lawyers had said there's not going to be any discussion out of court settlement, but there seems to be some.
Well, I have some insight on that, and Benji can jump into it. I must confide that I've spoken to two very senior women MPs. One of them very, very distinguished in human rights.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to mention her name here, but you can imagine who she is. She's vocal and quite senior within the Jubilee government. And she feels very strongly that Rachel Shebesh has been set a trap by the court judge, because should she agree to concede to discussions with Evans Kidero, it will always be perceived that there was a handshake under the table and that there was never dispensation of justice, and ordinary women cannot stand up for their rights against people who are perceived to be strong. May I say from the onset that I have a very high regard for Evans Kidero ordinarily, and he's a good friend of mine. But when it comes to the rights of women and the conduct exhibited by him, I feel that he should actually vindicate himself in a court of law. I don't think this is for negotiations or backroom deals. And I disagree with the learned judge in his opinion that he was telling these people how to conduct what for other Kenyans would be a criminal act. Assault is a very serious issue. It affects men and women. The issue of battery and spousal abuse is very big in Kenya. And it's not a matter that Rachel Shebesh, who has actually built a label as a defender of women's rights, would be seen in the wrong light, I think, if she's seen to have sold out. On the other hand, I would also say that if I was Evans Kidero, I would be pursuing the direction of a public apology. I would be pursuing reconciliation and admitting rather than refusing the obvious. And I think it is an abuse to women to be seen to disagree with the very obvious. It was on TV. You don't need witnesses to pull in and out. Everybody saw that Rachel Shebesh was lapped by the governor. And I think if I were him in any other democracy, the minimum is an apology. And in fact, in other countries, it would require resignation. Yeah.
Well, in his defense, he'd argue what people saw was a hand raised, and the next thing was a loud ayayaya. But at the end of the day, in terms of the evidence and all this, Benji, what Tony is saying, women, it would be unfortunate if Rachel is seen to be bowing and making a deal.
Sophia, we've got a crisis in this country. We've got a crisis of societal values. you've got to remember that we've got a lot of young people, which is why the Jubilee government ran their campaign on a platform of what they would do for the young people. We've got a lot of young people coming out of university. You've got a lot of young people, impressionable, gullible, looking for jobs and what have you. And all these young people have YouTube, they have TVs and what have you.
Right.
If you in any way want to dilute or dispute the fact that the governor did slap this lady, the message it sends clearly in the society is it's okay, you know, that impunity reigns. It is tragic, it is ridiculous. And I had the occasion last week to express to the Chief Justice that our courts continue to be, unfortunately, very random, very flippant, you know, very ridiculous, if you may, in the nature of judgments coming out of those courts. So Justice Lenaola's, you know, direction that you can go and have a backroom deal, obviously, you know, obscures the Constitution. You know, what does the Constitution say about bringing honor to your office, about being upstanding as a leader, about good conduct, about high ideals and what have you? I mean, there was nothing, you know, in reference to that. It was all about, well, you guys are big people in this country, all right? When have you found a barmaid slapped by a matatu conductor and the judge makes a public ruling that, okay, you can go and have a backroom deal and then report back by the 13th and let me know. So yes, we understand what the protocols are, what, you know, power is in this country, but we must not conflate power and impunity and say that as long as you are powerful in this country, then different rules apply, you know, and when you take the breathalyzer, you can say, I'm engineer minor.
You know, Sophia, also,
Well
there are also three other issues.
Thank you.
I think the first one really is there is a constitutional office of the Director of Public Prosecution, an independent institution to the judiciary.
Right.
The judiciary has been arguing for a very long time that part of the problem is politics interferes with the dispensation of justice. And therefore, the independence of the judiciary was a cornerstone, a pillar of the new constitution, the 2010 constitution. You can't now have, when the DPP is acting independently, above favor or fear, and directs the commissioner or the CID director to arrest and charge Governor Kidero and Rachel Shebesh for crimes they have been investigated to answer. And they are supposed to go to the tribunal to prove their innocence. Then the court intervenes or interferes with that independence for no good reason, other than what Benji is saying is an interference of power. When two arms of government are competing for power unconstitutionally, it's called anarchy. And if we allow this kind of practice to continue, we are going to have justice for the rich and justice for the poor. And that cannot be allowed.
That is not a message.
The second thing you remember, the former First Lady, Lucy Kibaki, was also in the media for having accosted a journalist at the Nation Media Group, having slapped a civil servant during an award ceremony at State House, and that also went under the carpet. And there is a feeling that because she was the First Lady, that was tolerable. And I'm saying that if we said the president that, look, if politicians commit violence and they can get away with it, then why are certain politicians before the ICC? Why are we making such a big issue in Kenya about the International Criminal Court? Because people are crying for justice. Why are they crying for justice? Because they are saying they were victims. And I'm saying the victim in this case is not Rachel Shebesh, neither is the villain Kidero. It is about a rule of fair administration of justice and for equality for all Kenyans.
Okay.
But let's just conclude by saying this.
Yes.
I blame the lethargy on this particular matter on a greater national lethargy. Where is maendeleo ya wanawake? Where are all the women reps in parliament? Where are the women liberation groups? Where are the young women Democrats, caucuses and what have you? What we have in this country is a very, very small minority of actual workers, people struggling and fighting for a better Kenya, and the rest standing by as observers, paying lip service. You know, the fact of the matter, Sophia, is that we have a problem with violence against women in this country. We do have a problem with that. And so just imagine your very average casual laborer in Mukuru kwa Jenga slum who has had running battles or issues with his wife and sees that clip of a governor doing that. I'm not saying that, you know, we hang Kidero, but I'm just saying that he will feel much more justified to administer instant justice to his wife, because even the governor does it. It's such a serious issue.
Yeah.
And so to imagine that even his wife, Susan Boyer, who's associated with the social issues, was the first to appear and support him, etc. I understand it's a crisis because this is your husband, but it is you women, by the way, that should have made the pressure on the governor unbearable, including organizations such as COVAO and all the different ones. But there's so much confusion in the civil society, so much confusion in the women's movements, and basically the governor is just sitting pretty, not worried about a single thing.
But Sophia, to be fair to the governor, if Shebesh withdraws the charge, then there is the other side of the coin. She was going to cash in on this issue. And that's why I'm saying it is both, spotlight is on both.
Initially, her team and the lawyers had indicated she was not going to get
I can say without,
I'm sure there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of offers.
And
they have to put on the table what negotiation means.
Yes.
Because if negotiation means I am sorry and we repent before the Lord and we go to church and somehow we are blessed, that's another matter.
Yeah.
But if negotiation means that there is
million.
a payout, I can't
I'm just saying as an example.
Well, I cannot allege any amount of money. I'm not allowed to do that. But if there was a handshake that negotiations need to be expounded upon, I can tell Shebesh today without contradiction, knowing politics, one day it will come to haunt her. Because one day watakuja kusema huyu mama alitaka tu pesa. Na nakwambia alikuja hapa akapiga kelele na hakukuwa na kesi. It will come to haunt her because in politics, when it suits the other side, they will bring it back into the political.
It will also send the message to women that there's a price for everyone and that you can accept money. If you have a rich guy who beats you up and he can offer you 2 million, fine.
Well, enough said on that one. It's a story we'll watch to see what happens in coming days. But also talk about the official opposition, the minority, coalition of reforms and democracy. A number of issues we've been hearing the principals talking about. But one of the biggest stories, in as far as they are concerned, is the upcoming elections, and several people have said, made their interests known for various positions, but we know the former Prime Minister will still be seeking the leadership position top. So what's your take?
In ODM?
In ODM, of course.
I don't know if you got the chance to watch the press conference on, I forget if it was Thursday or Friday. Sometimes I get the days mixed up nowadays.
Yes.
It's like every day is the same. But you had a press conference at Serena that, and I think you're on my Twitter, that for the best part looked quite disorganized and chaotic. CORD has a long way to go as far as organizing its house very well, speaking to the issues very candidly, very concisely, very coherently, because as I said on Twitter the other day, the work of the opposition is to be so credible, to be so substantive, to be so focused, that when people look at the policy pronouncements you're making and the positions you're taking on stuff, Sophia, they even should wonder how the heck they voted for the other guy. The work of opposition is not to noise make, is not to be chaotic, is not to be random and reckless. The work of the opposition, and CORD really has to put its foot forward. It's not just to issue threats, utaona chamtema kuni and what have you. It's not just to be the bad boy or the noisemaker. It's not to become an irritant. It is to offer such alternative solutions as to trash the stature and the work of the Uhuru government. That's the work of the opposition. Is CORD doing that? The answer is no.
Yeah.
Sophia, I am very intrigued. Maybe I'm one of the very few experts on the former Prime Minister, having worked with him for 7 years. And reading the headlines, I'm amused at journalists trying to analyze the former Prime Minister. And in fact, the only guy who got it was Philip Ochieng on Sunday in his column, where he actually said there are different things between what the Prime Minister says and what he means. This former Prime Minister, is a man who thrives in chaos. He cannot do his politics where there is order.
Yeah.
And I want to just tell Benji, what you are prescribing, or the narrative you're prescribing, would kill Raila's politics. Raila's politics are actually about the destruction of political competition.
But is he constructively doing so, as Benji is saying? Just
he doesn't do it constructively. And let me give you an example. Where is Kalonzo Musyoka? If you just look at CORD, you'll be seeing a lot of Raila and a lot of Wetangula.
Now
what has happened to
Wetangula?
Kalonzo? He's a core principle. If you look at all that disorder,
I was actually going to come to that. Yeah.
I can assure you, in another few months, there will be all this issue. I offer myself to leave ODM leadership at the right time. I can tell you when he says he's running, he will win with a landslide. New people will come. Many will be removed who are now office holders. Brand new people will come. He will put Wetangula into the game. He now has seen what happened in Bungoma, where Wetangula came with a resounding victory. You must remember Western Kenya is a key constituency for ODM, simply because of the tyranny of numbers. Let me give you an example. The largest community in Kenya, vote-wise, has been Central Kenya. What people don't know, the second community is Western Kenya. The third community is Nyanza. The third, after that, is actually Rift Valley, then Nyanza, and then Ukambani. So in the planning of what happened in the last election, Raila was aware what happened in the tyranny of numbers. So he must resurrect or revive the Western political machinery. And therefore the Wetangula factor, in terms of winning his seat and beginning to bring on the table political capital is going to be a massive game within ODM. And I think also the reconstruction of Nyanza politics. If you remember in the last nominations, how violent it was in Nyanza. So I think party elections are a way of weeding out what is unpopular in Nyanza, because a lot of people feel he's imposing people on them, like the Secretary General Anyang' Nyong'o and others, may be done away with. So I think this is engineered. I don't think there's so much disorder. I think Raila is realigning his politics for a presidential bid in 4 years' time.
4 years' time. And initially there was talk and conversations around him, willing to step aside and perhaps let a younger person, take the mantle. What would have that meant if really it had happened? Was he serious?
I don't think that's going to happen right now. One of the most important things to come out of this conversation, Sophia, is obviously, Tony's is a very cynical yet realistic analysis of, things as they are. And what is not in doubt is that we as a country have got to change our politics. Our politics is rubbish. Our politics is about self-aggrandizement. Our politics is about trickery and deception. We have got to change our politics, because bad politics, as a foundation, on top of that, you end up with useless institutions. You end up with charlatans and conmen for governors and leaders and what have you, people that care nothing about the issues the ordinary Kenyan faces in this country. And so what is not in doubt is that under this kind of politics, ODM is Raila and Raila is ODM. And we have to change that. We have got to start mentoring our young people. We have got to start standing our politics based on ideology, on a belief system that says if we do A, B, C, D, we can deliver 1, 2, 3, 4, and have it, as General Colin Powell like to say, as a clash of ideas, purely and nothing more. What we have currently now is a pursuit of power for power's sake. It is pitiful, it is ridiculous. It's just one guy and the other guy tussling to be the top, to be number one, to be the top dog, to channel resources to themselves and their family, to channel roads to their own initial people, so to speak. It is almost a crime. But Tony, you've got to be part of changing this conversation for the better.
As you wind up on CORD and just ODM as well in the upcoming elections, one of the other things is whether they're playing their role, as you mentioned, to keep the government in check, because at the end of the day, that it's what it boils down to. That you said earlier, that people should be able to look at them in serving and in working as that perfect outfit that is giving that alternative. You wonder, why did I even vote for this other guys? This guy's views.
Sophia, can you give me one policy position that CORD has stood for steadfastly, one or two, since they came into power as opposition?
Actually, I really think we are
Can you give me one or two?
Yeah, I think we're going to
major ones.
I would love to.
Apart from saying defend devolution, give me one deliverable that they have fought tooth and nail for.
Yeah, but there's a central point we can't get away from. Your question when you asked, would Raila give in? The question that I always ask young people, why do we want to be given anything? Because as we were speaking here about women's rights, we must talk about the youth and the young people, whether they are able or capable to take political power.
But
Because
how will you know if you don't give them a chance?
No, and that's my point. When you have understood that you're not going to be given a chance, you must create the alternative. Why I'm saying this is we have a competitive democracy. We don't have to be in ODM or COD. We don't have to be in Jubilee or in TNA. When young people see that there is an endemic problem in the issue of leadership, you must be able to say, this enough is enough. We are going to actually express ourselves. And I want to give you the example of Singapore. Because in Singapore, they decided they're going to move from a third world economy to a first world economy. And they did it in a record period of time with limited land, limited raw materials, because the political will. In fact, the former prime minister who became an icon because he said the greatest resource is the people. So my question, Sophia, when you ask the question, give the answer. The answer here is whether it's going to be ODM elections, whether it's going to be the next general election, will the young people take their position because they have the vote power and they have the numbers. But are we only going to be grumbling, or are we going to do something about it? Coming to the issue of the Westminster model of democracy, of which Kenya's 2010 constitution subscribes, it is the obligation of the opposition to check the government in order of the people of the day get a better government. It is actually a constitutional obligation. It is not actually something that they do out of choice. The reason they exist as an opposition is to check the government. And I want to say that in terms of dispensing that duty and that mandate, they have fallen far short of it. And the reason they have fallen far short of it is because the leader of ODM or COD, who is Raila, is not in parliament or in the Senate. I think it was a big mistake.
And his attention now is in being able to get there to 2017.
Exactly. I think in the strategy of COD, the idea that their principals will not run to be MPs or, you know, or nominate themselves was a critical issue that maybe was a mistake. Because without being at the center of politics, you cannot be able to lead it from outside or news conferences. I think Raila finds himself in a very difficult position because he's not been out of parliament for 2 decades. And it is very, very difficult through press conferences and waiting for a shootout on Bagathi Road. You know, every time there's a small thing, you know, you run for a press conference. You know, this is a worry because when he was at Prime Minister's question time, he was actually more effective in parliament. So I actually think that somebody should move out of, like Uhuru Kenyatta, political rise was Moi got Makto to resign as a nominated
and bring him in.
And Uhuru was nominated. It's not late for Raila.
That will cause a lot of noise. It tried initially, it flopped, it was there.
I can tell you this, if Raila wants to be an MP or a senator,
he can be in an hour.
Tomorrow or an hour. I think it'll take 1 hour.
I agree. Which brings me to the next question, Sophia. Was there a shootout? But I'll let you.
Yeah, we will talk about the Wetangula life in danger claim and, of course, now asking for an apology. But let's first go to what EACC is dealing with at the moment, the Ethics Anti-Corruption Commission. So much on its plate in terms of the various investigations they have to tackle. We have the CBK governor finding himself with this tender issue. There's Jane Waikenda, and last week it was so crazy. Did you see the kind of tweets and things that were being said after, you know, she collapsed, fainted after she was taken to their offices, and then NSSF as well. So all of this under EACC, investigations, stories out there, we're hearing all manner of things being said about them. Your comments, Benji?
You know, Sophia, on the corruption issue, I regret that in some ways I feel like I almost sound like a preacher. It is so absurd. It is so wrong. It is so ridiculous that for the most part, public service in Kenya has continued to be defined by how much money you can loot, how quickly you can steal it, and how well you can conceal it. This was one of the biggest failings of President Mwai Kibaki, a man that is one of my favorites, that was probably one of the best presidents Kenya will have in a long time, that achieved many things, but that was unable to break the back of the corruption camel. This thing has spiraled out of control, and no one has been left out of the net. Not the CBK governor, any tender. You know, this conversation on how much money is being lost in these tenders. On the railway, 400 billion. On the security features tender for CBK, governor involved. DPP recommending the governor, DPP recommending for the governor to be prosecuted. On immigration, we know that all of these different actions, even during the tenure of Otieno Kajwang, you could argue that these have been paid for, these lapses and these cases of malfeasance and wrongdoing have been paid for in human blood, because we are selling citizenship, we're selling passports, we're selling work permits to the highest bidder. It is a business. It is so painfully ridiculous that I simply cannot believe it. Having said that, I've actually met Jane Wakenda in her office 2 months ago. I felt and believed that she is the right person, that she is really committed. But you know, Sophia, it's gotten so messed up that you don't even know who's who. People are lying and getting better at lying by the day, lying through the teeth. It's become a competition for who can steal more. There's obviously no consequence. And here's the absurd part. President Uhuru, it is rumored, really hates for people to eat. I talk to people very close to him, to eat public money. So he's been very clear that if you eat money, you'll go to jail.
And he's made public, you know.
But the problem is, beyond the public pronouncements, which are turning out to be hot air, there's not been any constructive, decisive action, all right, to send a clear message that if you eat money in football, if you eat CDF money and whatnot, you are going to committee prison.
Yeah.
So what you have now is all these billions of shillings looted by a few powerful, very few people. You remember the whole thing of Kenya at 50 and the bid for 250 million, which then automatically just turned, once the president asked questions, to 50 million. So where was 200 million going to go? Let me say this finally, Tony, this is very important. This country continues to be at risk of imploding simply because people are too poor, with no jobs, with no food. And so if this country ever goes into crisis, Sophia, where we go and fight or the country burns, I must say that those who are doing this daily corruption must be held individually responsible. They must know that they're contributing towards the dry firewood that would then be the tinderbox that catches the spark and, you know, Kenya ceases to exist. I mean, the issue is that serious.
Right. And Anthony, as you weigh in, you know, because for Kenyans, yes, we've had the president, you know, make this pronouncement, hard talk on those he says corrupt and that they will not be entertained. But we continue to see not much, you know, efforts in this fight against corruption.
My friend, the president, has no integrity. Well, yes,
because he should be taking your advice.
But I want to say, has got, well, that's a good question, actually. I'll ask him the next time we speak, because I'm getting quite worried. I'm getting worried because part of the biggest problem the president is facing is patronage, the politics of patronage. When you appoint into senior government positions your friends, your buddies, political favors, and political reward, then you recreate this narrative, it's our time to eat. And my worry, even with this uproar right now on appointments, it is because you are picking people who are not professional, but because they're your political arm in the region or area or sub-tribe or village, etc. And these people come in and sit on a chair. And in fact, if you remember the scandals around Mutudho's appointment, was that even when he was chair of NACADA, he was accused or alleged to have been accused of having, misappropriated funds. So you've got this idea that people come in, and if they are in the board, they cannot argue against you because you are a political appointee or ally of the president. And I think one of the problems that faced President Kibaki in the early parts of his regime was he had to actually throw out 6 people. Alfred Gitonga was thrown out of State House, so was Murungaru, removed as one of the most senior ministers, later Matere Kireri and so on. And actually took the second term of Kibaki for corruption, the agro-leasing, and all those kind of issues that were endemic in the early part of the Kibaki administration to go away. So here, my friend Uhuru, if he's still my friend, has to actually be able to crack the whip and actually do an overhaul, not just of fighting corruption, but overhauling the people in charge of public resources. Because this problem is not a central government problem. If you go to the counties, the governors are even worse. You go to the governors and you find
corruption is being devolved.
60% of their revenues is going to expenditure related to the governor, luxury cars, travel, and all that. So I am saying to Benji, it's not just Uhuru or his government. It is the culture of Kenyans and this thing of patronage and putting people in office, not because of meritocracy, but because they are part of your political arm. Then they feel, to get back what I plowed in the election, I now must get back from the public what time to eat. Yeah. And I think that is the cancer. And I would recommend that this country reads Chuna Achebe's book, When Things Fall Apart. Because actually I'm beginning to see corruption tearing the credibility of the Jubilee government.
Yes.
And I think it is actually urgent that the DPP be allowed to do his work, that the independent institutions be allowed to do their work. And that's why I'm concerned when the judiciary is interfering, when the DPP is trying to become an independent, insulated institution. Because then how will he crack on corruption? Yes. Every time I'm charged, I run to court, and there is an injunction, there is an order. How will we fight this monster?
And that's why the judiciary has got to watch out now, and I've been very clear on this. I'm part of the Judiciary Transformation Framework platform that runs on social media, and through which we exchange a lot of ideas, starting all the way from with the Chief Justice to High Court judges. I don't know if there's a Supreme Court judge on there, maybe Njoki Ndungo herself. But it's very important that the DPP is strengthened. I must commend the DPP, Keriako Tobiko. His reconfirmation, as you know, was very controversial, very murky. And he, I think, has made a decision, as he once said when we went to a Thanksgiving service at Timothy Njoya's Kinoo Parish, that he had heard the message loud and clear, that he needed a chance from Kenyans to perform. I think he's really trying to perform. On the issue of corruption, Sophia, look at the issue of NSSF. National Social Security Fund is a fund, a pool of resources, all right, that it takes contributions from workers that you use as a basket to support retirees and old people to maintain a decent standard of living once they're out of active employment after serving 30, 40 years. But what do you do when you have no resources and no will to persecute corruption, and when you have a broken criminal justice system? This basket sitting there finds that there are fingers of very powerful people, very connected people, that look at this as a source of, fund to buy helicopters, to buy houses for themselves, etc. And so year in, year out, campaign season out, the NSSF fund, even looking at the Tasia project, is always a victim of inflation, of big time numbers,
Benji,
doubling and what have you.
Because you're a member of the framework of the judiciary, and I want to reform the judiciary, let's come back to the principle of stepping aside. The only way you're going to deal with corruption is when an allegation, a weighty allegation, is made on any officer.
You're told
you must step aside, but of course to allow, and then this, Benji, I want to emphasize.
Not only step aside.
We can tell the narrative. No, we can tell the narrative of CASA, of NSSF, of immigration, and of governors, and so on. But as long as these people can get away with it by sitting in the office, they do the cover-up. And the only way in which you're going to make people afraid because of whistleblowers.
It's not by stepping aside, Tony. No, it's by putting handcuffs on them, by arraigning them in court, by prosecuting and having and let me just say this very quickly. We are assisting EACC with all manner of things to build this country. But there's only one person and one person only that can lead this fight against corruption. And that is not the boss of EACC. It's not Mumo Matemu, who himself, as you said here, has credibility questions. That person is, for now, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta.
And the only way he can do it is to get political responsibility. And you cannot get political responsibility without the principle of stepping aside. Because as long as people use the office and are able to be a symbol of authority, then they intimidate not just the investigators, the public, and even the media.
people who would be perhaps witnesses.
And I want to say this. If people know there's a political penalty, people fear it. And Kibaki was reluctant initially. But when he understood the principle, he used it to the letter. Even the late Saitoti was out of office for nearly 6 months.
But Tony,
when the president asked and demanded that he step aside.
Allow me to hurt your feelings.
When Wiraria was asked to step aside. When Kemunya was asked to step aside. And I am saying, if the president was to make an example of only 3 or 4, because we can talk shop all morning, we must be able, like for example, today, if an instruction was given that the head of the NSSF stand aside, that the governor of the central bank step aside until his name is cleared, I cannot tell you corruption will immediately dip and people will become frightened.
But allow me to hurt your feelings, Tony. What this country needs is a societal, psychological, philosophical shift. All right? Because human beings are human beings. Allow me to hurt your feelings by telling you this. Believe you me, there's a director sitting somewhere, whether immigration or wherever you want to call it, who got there through hard work, through sometimes, very questionable ways, befriending some of these guys or what have you. And they feel that when you point a finger at them for stealing, in their psyche, they feel like, really? You want to arrest me for stealing some little money from an authority or from a body or a parastatal, while the president is accused of murder? I'm sorry, but that's a reality. And that's why when you have discussions and debate on governance issues, eligibility to run for the highest office in the land, the meaning of Chapter 6 on leadership and integrity, bringing honor and integrity to your office. Remember that they, unlike you and I, have a title that says, today if you send Sophia a letter, you just say Miss Sophia Wanuna. But if it's Shebesh, you say Honorable Rachel Shebesh Tony. That means something.
I would like to answer.
Means something.
I would like to answer this. This is very important.
It's not BS.
Sophia, the first thing is this, and I'm happy we are not agreeing with Benji, because we normally agree a lot. The first thing is he's talking to somebody who has resigned from very high office. And if Benji remembers, I was number 3 at the Prime Minister's office. And I enter history as one of the very few people who resigned at the
on
principle, at the height of the maize scandal. So I'm walking the talk. I'm talking about what I have done.
Yeah.
But I want to give him a difference between elected leaders and state officers. When a person is elected, they should be sacked the way they were elected.
Yeah.
By the people. And that is why we have in a democratic dispensation a 5-year cycle. Yes. Uhuru Kenyatta was elected as president. Kenyans very well aware he's before the ICC. Correct. Accused of all manner of things that Benji says hurt me. He's not hurting me. He's before the court. Already the prosecutor is fleeing from the case. The prosecutor has gone on record postponing the case without any application from the president. So the prosecutor is running from the case. But the issue is Uhuru was elected and everybody knew the charges were facing him. And therefore it is the people who can remove him. Okay. But we made a constitutional change when we promulgated the new Constitution of 2010. We said cabinet secretaries and state officers are going to be appointed and they are not going to be elected.
Right.
And therefore it is at the discretion of the president to bring in a directive, an executive order, that if you are accused of any corruption, you stand aside because you serve at his pleasure. You don't serve at the pleasure of the Kenyan people. Okay. And then his government will be judged on how he acted on the people under him. Excellent. And that is the difference between elected and appointed.
I was just saying hurt your feelings because if you said my friend is accused of murder, then it would really hurt me. So I didn't mean anything.
You were hurt, Benji?
Well, if someone said that a friend of mine is accused of murder, then it would be very painful. So it's within that context.
It's an accusation.
The
good thing is that nobody has been convicted. We are waiting.
Correct.
Yes. So let's, with the question, of course, on appointments, the whole of last week, again, all of the interesting conversations that was going on in the media, on social media as well, was on leader, the double appointment, the revocation on one hand. And, of course, there had been members, I think ODM MPs, we had them talk about it, and then the revocation came. And it's interesting that with the other appointments yet to come, that particular has been said mistake, the fact that the president was seen in having that revocation happen was seen not to have people who really are reading the law very clearly.
Now here I want to speak as a governance expert and just clarify a few things. I think that our society needs a lot of work when it comes to civic education, when it comes to understanding the issues. We get easily excitable and easily caught up in non-issues. Let me state a few things categorically just for the consumption and understanding of the Kenyan public. Number one, a chief executive, especially a political chief executive such as His Excellency the President, enjoys certain privileges to conceive where he wants to take the country via his government. Therefore, he enjoys certain rights and privileges to say that I, the leader of this, as Benji Ndolo, would nominate Tony to head my protocol, would nominate Sophia to head my accounting or not have you. Those are my choices based on recommendations I've received, based on my personal assessments as a politician, as a leader and what have you. Further to that now, these people, it is for the vetting process and the evaluation and the bureaucratic confirmation to determine that Sophia, before she did media, was part of a huge pyramid scam, for example, which she was the architect, for example. Now that information comes back to me and then I sit and ask myself, is that the person I want running my financial accounting system? So having said that, it is absolutely fallacious, juvenile and ridiculous for someone to say that Uhuru is appointing political rejects. Abdul Badida is a philosophical thinker, all right? He is as much a political reject as Hillary Clinton was a political reject when she didn't get elected for president. He's as much a reject as John Kerry was a political reject when he didn't get elected for president. But then what did Barack do? He was able to manage and harness these resources and the support they have, all right, to allow them to serve as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor and what have you. My point is that many a time we are missing the point, and one of the last ones I want to make again as a governance person is to remind Kenyans and professionals that law serves man and not the other way around.
Okay.
You don't have to always, craft everything within, is it legal for you to buy your wife another car this year? This is where we're going.
Sophia,
an overly legalistic society where everything is referenced to a statute.
No, I've heard you.
It's ridiculous.
But I think
But still,
I'm enjoying
law
this.
must be followed.
It must be followed,
no.
yes, but it doesn't
Excuse me,
supersede the need for a good person who will not steal CDF money.
My brother, being
This
a
is
governance
crazy.
expert,
Yes.
should also agree that I'm a political strategist. But
Yes, you
I
are.
want to say this. Uhuru Kenyatta must not overrate the office that he holds. Because under the 2010 constitution, he's not allowed that luxury.
Yeah.
I want to inform my friend Benji Ndolo that we have a coalition called the Jubilee Coalition. The agreement of which I'm in possession of, happy to email him a copy, is
Please.
deposited at the political parties registrar. It is in black and white
That.
what the manifesto and the aspirations of this coalition will, the social contract between the governor and the governed. We promised as a Jubilee coalition that we are going to reach out on a meritocracy-based government for the young people, for people who are above board in terms of integrity, in terms of experience, in terms of age,
So
etc.
only young people
no,
should serve?
I'm not saying that. I'm talking about the promises you make when you're running for office, because those are the promises to which you shall be held to
But
So
account.
how
isn't
young is
there a
Mugabe?
substantial number of
Sophia,
young people?
I really ask you. Let me
Okay.
give you an example.
Yes.
In Europe, you have the Green Party,
Right.
which believes in the environment, Sophia. And they run on environmental issues, and they actually say in their manifesto and in their creed, we are not moving from left to right. This is our agenda. Now, I'm saying at the center of the Jubilee promise was this promise that they are going to regenerate this promise, that
Okay.
50 years youth can continue waiting, young people can continue waiting. On the other hand, Raila was arguing in that same election that, hold on, there's nothing wrong with the older and the senior people. You need some experience, you're not experienced enough, etc.
Point.
And therefore, politically speaking,
Right.
this idea and that is existing, that Jubilee is not living up to the expectation of the young people. And I said this to Sakaja the other day on Jeff Penange Live,
Yes, we
that
watched
he's
him.
28 years and he's chairman of the National Alliance and actually the overall chairman of the coalition. But he's quite happy at 28 to say, I'm capable to chair TNA. But Matu Wamai, who is 85, is the most experienced to chair KCCC. So if you look at one parastatal and you compare that the Jubilee dream of I Believe was run by young people, led by Sakaja, then one wonders, is there only one Sakaja in Kenya who's 28? What about the other 28, 30-year-old Kenyans who also can make a difference the way he made a difference?
Point.
And that issue is the issue that I'm disagreeing with. I have no problem with Dida, I have no problem with Mudaura, but they have children as I have children. We must give way for our children to be able to live the Kenyan dream and be able to make the impact in this
Be able
nation.
to participate, basically.
Yes.
To be able to participate.
And that issue I will never surrender. And Uhuru, I'm saying to you, you owe the young people, they voted to you in the millions. You must give them opportunity to learn and make mistakes under your watch so that this country can move on.
I guess in layman's
Eyeball
terms,
to
what Tony
eyeball.
is saying, and I'll say this in one sentence.
Yes.
It is pretty disturbing that people like Ambassador Muthaura that have walked the corridors of power from State House to Office of the President and the Treasury and what have you, that have been ambassadors since the 1960s, when JFK was president, that they are still in the inner sanctum of power today. I believe maybe when they started, someone like Barack Obama was 2 years old, was a baby. 4 decades later, when he's president of the superpower of the world, they're still sitting in cabinet meetings and talking to presidents on the phone.
Okay.
It's
surreal. Let's talk about police.
I wanted to remind you about Tom Mboya,
yes,
who at 29 was one of the greatest ministers Kenya has ever had. Correct. Wrote the economic game plan of this nation.
Yes.
Did the Kennedy airlift of 69 that produced luminaries like Wangari Maathai,
we will definitely watch,
you know,
and see what will happen with the other appointments. You know, perhaps he's had the messages, the different conversations, those in support, those against, and we'll see.
Let's talk about vetting.
Police vetting. We're so excited about police vetting. Do you have some information?
Drama.
It has been very interesting to watch, and I've just following on the TL as well. What people are saying, watching and following on TL as well. When I'm not watching on TV, but it's been just what has been coming out. Of course, corruption, inefficiencies, service delivery, challenges with that. But also the question of, how much who has and how they are able to accumulate that. But the biggest question at the end of this is that will this exercise serve to bring about those reforms that are so much needed in the police service?
Sophia, as an analyst, I also do radio, I do this. I like to be very, because we have a following and we have listeners. I like to be very, what's the word? I like to be very hands-on. I don't want to come here and espouse views to somebody who's watching in Mombasa and Kilifi and where have you, far-flung areas that are speculative. So last week I made some time and I went down there. I read the mood. I was able to meet some of the, commissioners and just look at how the whole secretariat is working. Yeah. I was able to pay a visit to the chair, Johnston Kavuludi. I'll tell you this, when I got to his office, he was on his feet. He looked me dead in the eye and he said 3 words. Who are you? Like that. He's a very tough guy, all right? He's a very super tough guy. He's the kind of guy that, as you heard one of the officers say, you're just basically shaking in front of. Very tough. The questions are very, very tough. You heard the officer saying, please be lenient to us.
There should be tough questions, Benji.
Exactly, and that's my point, is that initially when this process started, Kenyans felt that this is window dressing, that this is just, procedural, another sham to prove to Kenyans that we've done this while nothing is happening. It's my assessment that this is real vetting. Real questions are being asked. I remember on one of the sessions last week, he reminded an officer on the chair that private investigators were on the ground and you need to be very careful and very accurate with what you're telling us because we're checking and we're verifying. This is good for the country in a big sense. We do want to know our leaders, we want to know our police officers and what have you. You've seen very many of them struggle to explain details of some of the wealth. You've seen them struggle because of a very poor command of the English language.
And some
how
have
you
not
speak
been
many
assigned
times
or worked for 1 year.
Many times, some of them are from Standard 7 and what have you. And I'm not saying that, to have many degrees necessarily makes you a good cop. But I'm just saying that when you see someone struggling to reason, to put their thoughts in order, to express that, you then start to understand why there's been the kind of rot that there's been, why there's been the lack of, for example, I remember the in charge of inspections being asked what he has done further to just looking and writing. When have you gone to the IG and the PS internal security and the cabinet secretary and said, look, I've just completed my review for 1 calendar year. This is unacceptable.
So you
this
feel,
is what must
Benji,
be done.
This is working. The questions
it's working to the extent
right,
that it's pushing them to account. It's
Yeah.
pushing the envelope. One of the officers I spoke to last week was telling me, I foresaw this some years ago. I told my colleagues, one day we will be asked questions in front of the entire Kenyan public.
Sophia,
and I found him to be a very smart
Sophia,
guy.
if you allow me to break rank with you and Benji on this, I actually want to stand with the police. We have one of the most poorly paid police forces in the world.
Right.
It is a miracle that anybody does this job. I have had opportunity in my career as a journalist to write about many things, but nothing tears my heart than when you look at a payslip of a police officer who is asked to die in our defense, in our security, in any shootout every day. And then, other than the news headline that 4 policemen were shot that day, I notice we don't even say their name. We don't even know their family. We don't know how that widow and those children survive after that. We are at the top of the mountain always criticizing and shouting at this police force of dedicated men and women, a large number of them, who put their lives at risk, who stand in the cold of night. As I was driving here at 6 in the morning, there were police officers, God knows what time they woke up, to be bundled up in a pickup, dropped in every roundabout, everywhere. And I want to say this, we must be very careful as a nation, because you cannot break the bone of the society. And the manner in which there is gang rape on the police is unacceptable to me. There is some movement in the police force, like the creation of an independent office for the Inspector General of Police. If the man is incompetent, does not mean that society does not respect the police force. Then there's a question and a mechanism to change him and put somebody who is competent. Right. That's the first thing. Secondly, as a society, how much are we investing in the police force? So that people who are capable and can put a sentence together we are able to do, because Benji and I and you enjoy a better life than the ordinary policeman. And therefore, we can be able to have the luxury of putting English in paragraphs and stanzas. The narrative that the policeman has that advantage is not there. Because this is perhaps a person who has struggled for 30, 40 years from the bottom of the police line upward.
Tony,
I also want to say this. It is very good to start the principle of accountability. Good. But then as we do so, remember, when you embarrass the leadership of the police in front of their juniors, this is a sensitive security issue. You must handle some of these interviews with more decorum. Because there is a command structure. I'm saying so. And this was my worry when the Chief Justice was being interviewed in Parliament and vetted. And the issue that there needs to be some kind of act to guide MPs on how to vet senior people, so that you don't put people in a position where actually you dispatch their character to an extent that they cannot do their work. I think that yes, the public have a right to inquire into somebody, but I promise you, Sophia, and I know you're a godly person, if I were to put you before that commission led by that man he has described, and they put you through what they are putting those policemen through, Sophia, even you would not
might
score.
wet.
You might, because it is a complete assault. So I think there needs to be a tempering down, and actually not looking at you are a villain, I must prove you're a villain kind of attitude. I think there must be a more accommodative way to look for better police.
As we finalize,
because I want to talk very quickly.
I must agree with Tony, but I think he's ahead of the game here a little bit. I think the validation, the verification of the different officers and all of that, the cleanup process, the vetting process, so to speak, is really tier 1, and what he's talking about is tier 2. I personally do not believe in the culture of criticizing for criticizing's sake and throwing stones from the outside. I choose to understand and be compassionate with the police. I choose to support the police. I choose to help them in their thinking process. I choose to help make them a better police force. But we must now understand that the next frontier will be to segregate the police force from the political process and for it to be better resourced. Because what you have now is their money and a secret vote being used by politicians, police being manipulated all the time by powerful people. But now we must resource the police force properly after this vetting and have it as a standalone, independent IG's office, as is envisaged in the Constitution, for the betterment and the better security of the Kenyan people. Okay,
7:57 a.m. We must bring this to a close, but I want both of you, as you make your final comments, to talk about Wetangula's incident on Bagathi Road. He has since asked for the IG to apologize because of the billboard, and you remember how much fun that got on Twitter.
If you allow me to go, and then I'll let...
in as far as what could have happened, the former Prime Minister and himself have insisted there was some firearm shooting.
Sophia, I don't know that it was a shooting.
Nobody...
I don't know for sure that it was a shooting. For the simple fact that if, as they allege, the Jubilee government wants Wetangula out and they're going to shoot, for example, I think that his car would have been shot up mad. It would be full of holes. Wetangula himself would probably be really injured. I don't think it would be the kind of casual affair we've seen. One of the other things, of course, the mistakes that they made is you have what you call ballistic assessments, where you want to look at the projectile, how it came in, etc. So you saw the Prime Minister as Adan Duale. I was alleging to the other day, and I never thought in my whole life I would reference anything towards Adan Duale. But you saw the PM stepping on the running board, getting to look at the Land Cruiser. That is tampering of evidence, so to speak. And so this whole thing has been as curious as you can imagine. It is also instructive to me that the former Vice President Kalonzo has not said march on it. And so I think authoritatively we've got to ask, was this really a shooting? I don't know. As I conclude, last week I couldn't find enough good things
to say
so
about
I was
Kenya.
able, yes, you remember I lost my uncle, and I just remembered really that in the midst of, you know, all these strike threats and what have you, you can see UASU universities are going on strike today about looting of money and what have you. Doctors and nurses have been on strike. The staff at Kalimoni Mission Hospital in Ruiru had been absolutely fantastic. I'd like to thank them. I'd like the country to know that a small mission hospital that no one really knows about does exist, full of compassionate care, full of wonderful stand-up Kenyans. Again, I just want to go on the record and thank them and wish everybody a wonderful week, because this is the way it is.
This is the way it is.
Well, I just want to condemn both the CORD leadership and the Jubilee leadership for politicizing a criminal report. I think that both the political arms are making it impossible for the independence of the police and for justice to be done properly. Moses Wetangula, a friend of mine, is a distinguished lawyer and a senator, and it will suffice it to say enough to write a report and leave it to the police to handle it professionally. I think the fact that CORD politicized that matter, and the fact that the Jubilee repoliticized the matter, retweeted the matter, if you like, is not good for Kenya. It's an intimidation to the police and trying to get the police to go one way or the other. So they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. So I condemn both sides.
Well said.
With regard to how we have discussed this morning, Sophia, you feel as though it's very dark. I just want to tell Kenyans the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When he said, only when it's dark enough can you see the stars. And I want to say this, the Kenyans need to understand, because we are a vibrant democracy. If we continue to defend the rights of the media and the rights of citizens to express themselves, instead of always complaining, the solution is us. Let us use these lessons that are happening now to make informed decisions in the future on who we elect, how we elect them, and what mandate we give them. And that means we become responsible for the things we choose and the things we want.
And Sophia, consider introducing a funny moment.